Hi, everybody. Today I'm going to analyze and break down a condolence letter written to someone who's just suffered a life-altering injury, a broken back with total paralysis. And this is a beautiful example of empathy. I've written a lot about how to be empathic. I've sort of talked about it in general. Today I want to give you an example of what I think is a great empathic letter that could really change someone's life. Hi, everybody. I'm Bruce Lambert from HowCommunicationWorks.com. Let's get started. So yesterday, Charles Krauthammer, who was a conservative columnist for the Washington Post and a commentator for Fox News, died of cancer. There were many obituaries and condolences written on social media, and there was one particular post written on Twitter which contained this amazing letter that Charles Krauthammer had written. Now, I'll be honest with you, I was not a fan of Charles Krauthammer. My politics and his did not agree, but this letter really moved me, and I thought it was a great example of empathic communication, and I wanted to break it down and try to talk about why it worked. What was it about this letter that was so effective? So I'll give you just a little bit of context. Charles Krauthammer, as a young man, got into a diving accident and broke his back. And for the rest of his life, he was paralyzed from the waist down and used a wheelchair for mobility. He became a very famous journalist, and then, as I said yesterday, died of cancer. So he has a lot of understanding of what it's like to live with a spinal cord injury because he himself lived with a serious spinal cord injury for more than 50 years. So someone went on Twitter to eulogize Charles Krauthammer and talked about a letter that Charles Krauthammer had written to his father. And the father was a man who had a surfing accident, who also, as a result of the surfing accident, broke his back, severed his spine, and was paralyzed from the neck down. So what I'm going to read to you from and analyze is the letter Charles Krauthammer wrote to this man who had just been paralyzed. And I'm just going to read to you and stop with certain sections and talk about what's so effective about them. So he says, "Dear Mr. Jenkins, I heard about your accident. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. This is one of the simplest things you can do when you're empathizing. Some people forget. You'd be amazed in the messages I see from health professionals talking to patients. Only a small minority of them even say, I'm sorry." So he begins, "I heard about your accident. I'm so sorry. I enjoyed meeting you last year, and I'm deeply sympathetic to your new and most harrowing situation." So here he's identifying with and empathizing with what he calls your new and most harrowing situation. I think the effective, eloquent language, identifying with what the other person's going through. "As you know, I've been there." Now, normally I don't advise people to talk too much about themselves when they're empathizing, but in this case I think the identification is so strong, and the fact that Krauthammer himself had suffered a spinal cord injury is what gave him the credibility to say what he's about to say. So he says, "I know full well how difficult things are at the beginning and often how hopeless they seem. I also do know what's possible, and it turns out to be quite a lot." So he empathizes directly with the hopelessness that this Mr. Jenkins may be feeling, and that's just a straightforward recognition of the other person's feelings. That's empathy. And he says, "I do know what's possible, and it turns out to be quite a lot." So this is reassurance, which I, again, often caution against, but you can see how what's right, sort of textbook empathy, people who are really skilled can kind of go against the grain and still be really effective. So he's trying to both empathize and encourage this person that his life is not over. So it says, "I don't pretend it's everything," in terms of he's referring to what's possible. "I don't pretend it's everything." So he's acknowledging the severity of the injury. "But a good and productive and deeply enjoyable life is possible." This is offering hope. "What it required in my case was the simple determination to keep going in the direction I was headed. I found I could do psychiatry." Krauthammer trained as a psychiatrist as a young man, "and then a journalism career at a totally even par with my colleagues." So here we get more encouragement. "Your accident's occurring much later in life than mine. I was 22, which presents its own challenges." So he's again empathizing with the challenges that Mr. Jenkins is about to face. "On the other hand, you have so many years of experience and much respect and admiration from friends, colleagues, and family accumulated over a lifetime." So this is acknowledging the taking the perspective of the other person, acknowledging his situations, and pointing out the strengths and resources that he'll have for coping. They will serve you well and help you through what will at first be significant challenges. Again, just continuing to acknowledge the reality of the other person's experience. This is the essence of empathy, seeing the world through another person's eyes. I write you because I know the challenges firsthand. I know how discouraging they can be initially. So this is acknowledging it's going to be hopeless. It's going to be discouraging. Notice how he names so many of the things that Mr. Jenkins is likely to feel. This will make Mr. Jenkins feel seen and heard and understood. I know how discouraging they can be initially, but I also know with absolute certainty that they can be accommodated and even overcome, and that a good life is possible. Again, this is this message of hope, which goes beyond just empathy. And then it goes to a second page. I'm fully aware of how terribly discouraging it is to have to put in twice the effort for gains that seem so meager at the beginning. So here's the perspective taking again. It's so discouraging, terribly discouraging, to put in twice the effort for gains that seem meager in the beginning. So he's not only just recognizing what the person feels currently, but anticipating what the person might feel in the future. So this is really the perspective taking part of empathy, not just the emotional contagion, feeling what another person's feeling, but putting yourself in their perspective and imagining what they're about to endure, not just what they're currently enduring. And again, the reassurance, I can assure you it can be done, and then it is rewarded. I don't mean to sugarcoat things. Life is more difficult with a spinal cord injury. So this is just an acknowledgement of what has been lost and of the seriousness of the injury. But the obstacles are not insurmountable. I know this is all scant consolation. This reminds me of Abraham Lincoln's famous letter to Mrs. Bixby, who had lost 5 children in the Civil War. You're basically talking about reaching the limits of language. I talked about this in one of my other empathy videos, that you sometimes have to acknowledge the limits of language. No matter how beautifully someone can write a letter of condolence or consolation, when we've suffered a very serious loss, no amount of verbal consolation can heal the wound or replace what has been lost. So he's acknowledging that. I know this is all scant consolation, and it's not really meant as that. He says was that. That's just a typo. It's not really meant as that. It's simply meant to give you a different perspective on your future. This is really interesting as a way of helping people reappraise their situation. This is a very, very advanced form of empathy. So I've talked about in my other empathy video that feelings are actually the outcome of a cognitive process. We think of feelings as a visceral thing, as in our guts and in our bodies. But actually the modern theory of emotions is that emotions are the end result of a cognitive process of appraisal. What appraisal means is an assessment of the external environment and the threats that it presents to us and the things that we value. And it's only at the end of that appraisal that we end up having an emotion. So if I see a light in the distance and I appraise it as a train coming at me, I'm going to be afraid. If I see a light in the distance and it's a flashlight and my friend is walking towards me, I'm going to appraise that as no threat. I'm going to be happy to see my friend. So the emotion comes at the end of a cognitive appraisal. What Krauthammer is doing here is helping Mr. Jenkins reappraise his own situation so that he might arrive at a different emotion. Not telling him how to feel. He's offering a different appraisal and inviting Mr. Jenkins to come to a different appraisal of the situation. And Krauthammer has the credibility to make this appraisal. This isn't like a friend or a family member or a nurse or a doctor saying it's all going to be okay. This is someone who's been through it saying, I've been through it. It was terrible. It's life-limiting, but you can still have a meaningful life. So this can help Mr. Jenkins reappraise the situation and maybe then at the end of the appraisal come to a different emotion. So rather than despair, he might have some hope. He talks about his perspective. Mine is from, here we are right here. Mine is from the rear view mirror. I know what actually can be. I also know that for you, so soon after your accident, it is prospective. You are looking into a future that is necessarily unclear to you. So here again, he's literally taking his perspective. You are looking into a future that's unclear to you. I wish only to assure you from my experience of 45 years post-accident that it can be a very good life indeed. And here's reassurance, but for most of us who are not as skilled as Krauthammer, I don't normally recommend reassurance. I normally recommend just being with people in their pain. But here I think it probably works. And then he closes, I hope this is helpful. And this is a simple offer of empathy. One of the first things we can do when we empathize is just say that we want to help people. And Krauthammer says it at the end. I wish you all the best in your recovery, Charles Krauthammer. So that's all I have for today. I think this is a beautifully composed letter. Many of us will have the occasion and opportunity in our lives to write letters like this, where close friends, family members, acquaintances have suffered a grievous illness or injury or loss of some kind. And I think we can return to beautiful examples like this to see what real compassion, real empathy, real consolation done at a very high level of skill and effectiveness looks like. I hope you enjoyed that brief analysis of Charles Krauthammer's letter of condolence to Mr. Jenkins. If you like this kind of video, I talk about all sorts of different issues in communication, how communication works, communication skills, conversation, etc., on this YouTube channel. So you might consider subscribing if you like this kind of content and you'll be aware of it more often, or liking the video if you like this particular video. I'd appreciate that. I would really appreciate hearing from you. I sometimes don't know if there's anybody out there listening, and I'd love to hear from you and see what you think, what you'd like to learn about next. So leave me a comment down below. Come on over to howcommunicationworks.com. That's my website, where there's a blog where I write all about a variety of issues in how communication works, and there are links to most of these videos there as well. Lots of other material there that you can download and read. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.